Carl Jung's final message about empaths overturns everything we think we know about compassion. Rather than viewing empathy as some sort of divine gift, Jung suggested that it often originates from trauma. Specifically, he believed the empath is typically a child who was never granted permission to be selfish. That instinct to fix others, absorb pain, and disappear into the background. That's not spiritual, it's survival. It's a behavioral pattern shaped by growing up in an environment where their own needs were too loud, their feelings too much, and their existence seemed conditional, accepted only when they served others. And what makes Jung's insight so powerful is that he didn't see these individuals as broken. He viewed them as halfway through a vital psychological journey he called individuation, the process of becoming whole. Deep inside, you've probably felt this truth already. You've known that your empathy wasn't free. It came at a cost you couldn't always name. Jung understood that. He wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But for many empaths, that version of the self has long been buried under layers of emotional labor. Maybe you felt like your true self was never allowed to emerge. That to keep the peace, you had to abandon authenticity. If that's the case, you're not alone. And you're not wrong. Jung believed that your sensitivity isn't your problem. The absence of healthy boundaries is, and without boundaries, empathy isn't a gift. It's a burden. That's why his concept of sacred selfishness is so critical. It's the act of reclaiming your right to exist fully, unapologetically, and alongside others, not beneath them. This sacred selfishness is not a rejection of empathy. It's what happens when empathy grows up. It's when you stop vanishing for the sake of others and begin showing up for yourself with the same passion you've always offered to those around you. Jung recognized a pattern. The most emotionally generous people often carry the deepest wounds. Their compassion wasn't a virtue. It was a form of compensation. They gave not because they wanted to, but because they believed their worth depended on it. Picture this, a child who scans their home like a radar, detecting every shift in tone, every unspoken emotion. They learn to anticipate their parents' moods before a word is spoken. They don't do this out of curiosity. They do it for survival. And over time, this constant scanning becomes their identity. But this isn't a personality trait. It's trauma wiring. And the cost? They lose touch with their own inner world. Jung called this person a wounded healer. Someone who cares for others, not from fullness, but from emptiness. In Jungian psychology, this adaptation, the transformation of a child into an emotional caretaker, isn't seen as growth. It's seen as premature ego development. It happens not through healthy nurture, but out of necessity. When a child's emotional safety depends on anticipating others' feelings, the brain responds by rewiring itself for hyper-awareness. What looks like intuition is often just survival. You didn't learn to sense people's moods because it was fun. You learned because not knowing meant danger, and it worked. That's what makes this so painful. Your trauma response got you praise. It earned you love, or what seemed like love. But Jung knew this gift wasn't free. It came at the cost of what he called authentic selfishness, a core ingredient in building a stable sense of self. In a healthy childhood, you're supposed to develop a sense of self-worth, to believe your needs matter just as much as anyone else's. But for the empath, this gets replaced by an opposite belief, that your needs are unsafe, that expressing them leads to disapproval or abandonment. So, you shrink, you perform, you overfunction, and this distortion continues into adulthood. This is the empath's paradox. The more attuned you are to others, the more estranged you become from yourself. You become an expert in decoding others' feelings, but remain emotionally illiterate when it comes to your own. And Jung saw this not as weakness, but as overdevelopment of one part of the psyche at the expense of another. You're not broken, you're imbalanced. This imbalance forms what Jung described as the shadow, the aspects of yourself you were trained to reject. And for empaths, the shadow is often filled with what Jung called forbidden selfishness, needs, anger, boundaries, the urge to say no, the desire to rest, to be left alone, to not be on all the time. These aren't signs of a bad person. These are signs of a whole one. But if you grew up in a family or culture that taught you these instincts were shameful, they got buried. You were taught that care is good, but only when it flows outward. Inward care, that was selfish. So, you exiled these parts of yourself to the unconscious. And yet, the shadow always finds a way to leak out. It shows up in your exhaustion, in your simmering resentment, in the guilt you can't quite place. You're not just tired, you're depleted, not because you care too much, but because you've never been taught how to care for yourself. That's the missing piece. Jung believed healing didn't require you to kill the shadow, but to integrate it, to bring those forbidden parts of yourself into the light. You don't need less empathy. You need more boundaries. You don't need to be less kind. You need to be more complete. That's sacred selfishness, realizing you are not here to save the world at your own expense. You are here to be whole. Integration begins when you stop apologizing for having needs. Jung believed that the psyche can only heal when it acknowledges all of itself, not just the socially acceptable parts. And for empaths, this means unlearning the belief that self-preservation is betrayal. It's not. It's survival. To just a healthier kind. The part of you that wants rest. The part that longs for solitude. The part that no longer wants to carry everyone else's burdens. That part isn't wrong. It's real. It's human. Jung wrote, "The healthy individual is able to love himself as much as he loves others." But for many empaths, this feels impossible. They have been conditioned to associate love with sacrifice. They believe worth is measured by how much they can carry for others. So when they begin to pull back, to protect their energy, to say no, they feel guilt, a heavy, irrational guilt that says, "I'm abandoning people." But in reality, they're finally refusing to abandon themselves. This is the turning point Jung called the individuation imperative. The moment when your soul insists you stop living as a function and start living as a person. This phase can feel like a breakdown. Suddenly, the roles you played for so long don't fit anymore. You're tired of being the fixer, tired of being the listener, tired of being the one who always knows what to say, always knows how to soothe. And you begin to wonder, who am I if I'm not helping? The people around you might not react well. In fact, many won't. You've changed. They might say, "You're not as caring as you used to be. You're being distant, cold, selfish." But Jung would say, "Good. That means you're beginning to differentiate, to become who you truly are, not who you had to be." Individuation requires courage, especially for empaths who've built their identity around usefulness. But Jung insisted, your life is not a role to perform. It's a truth to embody. One of the greatest fears empaths face during this process is rejection. What if setting boundaries means losing people? And Jung was clear, it might, but the people you lose are often those who are attached to your self-abandonment, not to you. He called this differentiation anxiety, the discomfort others feel when you stop playing the part they expected. It's painful, yes, but it's also liberating. Because when you reclaim your needs, you're not becoming selfish, you're becoming conscious. You're moving from reflex to intention, from caretaking to connection, from emotional reaction to emotional responsibility. And in that shift, your empathy doesn't shrink. It sharpens. It becomes something you offer deliberately, rather than something you're trapped inside. That's the transformation Jung envisioned, not the end of empathy, but its evolution. This evolution is what Jung referred to as conscious empathy. It's empathy by choice, not compulsion. The difference may seem subtle, but it's monumental. When your empathy is unconscious, it rules you. You absorb everything, react automatically, and feel overwhelmed. But when it becomes conscious, you begin to choose. You ask, is this mine to carry? Do I have the capacity to hold space for this right now? And most importantly, can I do this without losing myself in the process? To get there, empaths must develop ego boundaries. What Jung saw as crucial for psychological health. Ego boundaries help you discern where you end and others begin. Without them, you merge. You take on people's energy, feelings, even responsibilities. You mistake their pain for your own. But with strong ego boundaries, something shifts. You can witness someone's struggle without absorbing it. You can be close without collapsing. Jung called this balance compassionate detachment. It's the ability to stay connected without becoming consumed. You're not stepping away out of indifference. You're stepping back for clarity. This isn't withdrawal, it's wisdom. Because the empath who gives without boundaries eventually gives from depletion, and giving from emptiness isn't noble. It's unsustainable. As you establish these boundaries, your relationships will change. Some will deepen, others will dissolve. Jung named this process relational recalibration, the natural restructuring that occurs when you stop functioning out of obligation. The people who loved your compliance might resist your clarity. They'll miss the version of you who always said yes, who never complained, who absorbed their chaos without question. And when that resistance comes, it's tempting to go back, to shrink, to overgive. But Jung warned about this moment. He called it the integration temptation, the urge to revert to old patterns when others struggle with your growth. He understood that stepping into your full self might feel threatening to those who relied on your invisibility. But he also knew this: those who truly care about you will adapt. The ones who only cared about your function will fall away. This shedding can feel lonely at first. You might mourn the connections that fade. You might feel guilt or grief. Jung described this as identity grief. Mourning the version of yourself that was built on survival, not authenticity. And that grief is sacred. It means you're evolving. As you walk through this recalibration, you'll start to notice something. The quality of your relationships improves. You stop attracting chaos. You stop fixing broken people. Instead, you begin connecting with others who are also doing their work. People who respect your boundaries, who listen as much as they speak, who don't need you to save them, just to meet them. These are the authentic encounters Jung wrote about. Encounters where no one is performing, no one is rescuing, and both people show up whole. Authentic encounters are the natural result of individuation, the journey of becoming your true self. In these relationships, you're not the emotional sponge. You're not the therapist, the fixer, or the endlessly patient caretaker. You're just you, complex, sensitive, imperfect, and whole. And the people who meet you there, they aren't drawn to your usefulness. They're drawn to your presence. Jung saw these kinds of relationships as essential for the integrated empath. But to reach this level, you must first embrace your psychological sovereignty. The understanding that no one else has the right to dictate your experience, not your feelings, not your needs, not your truth. You are the final authority on your emotional landscape. And this, Jung insisted, is not selfishness, it's maturity. This sovereignty doesn't come easily. It often requires a phase Jung called reparenting, learning to give yourself the love, validation, and protection you never received as a child. You start speaking to yourself with compassion. You validate your emotions instead of minimizing them. You honor your limits instead of bulldozing over them to meet others' expectations. You stop treating yourself like a project to fix and begin treating yourself like a person to care for. Through this reparenting process, something remarkable begins to happen. Your empathy becomes selective. Not everyone gets access to it. Not every crisis earns your energy. Jung called this relational selectivity the conscious discernment of who is worthy of your emotional investment. You stop confusing intensity with intimacy, drama with depth, neediness with love. This discernment doesn't harden you, it frees you. You begin to recognize that not every plea for help is sincere, that some people seek empaths not for connection, but for control. They're not looking to grow. They're looking for someone to absorb their pain so they don't have to face it. And when you stop playing that role, they may accuse you of being selfish, distant, different, but you'll know the truth. You're not less kind. You're more boundaried. And that's growth. This is when you truly begin to give from overflow, not obligation. From fullness, not fear. You're not helping because your identity depends on it. You're helping because you choose to. Jung saw this shift as a return to the empath's original power, not as an open wound, but as a conscious healer, someone who supports others from a place of wholeness, not woundedness. You don't need to be needed anymore. You no longer seek worth through sacrifice. Instead, you experience what Jung called earned security, a deep inner stability that doesn't fluctuate with other people's moods or opinions. It's the freedom to be with others without losing yourself. Earned security is the cornerstone of the integrated empath. It's the realization that your emotional state no longer depends on the people around you. You are no longer performing for approval or scanning the room to anticipate emotional shifts. You've outgrown the need to control your environment just to feel safe. Instead, you've developed a calm rooted in self-trust. And from this grounded place, your empathy becomes more powerful, not less. Jung called this transformation conscious sensitivity. It's the ability to feel with others without being consumed by them. You can sit with someone in their sorrow without collapsing into it. You can hear their rage without reacting. You can love fiercely without losing your center. This level of mastery makes you magnetic in a different way. You're no longer attracting those who need to be fixed. You're attracting people who value emotional reciprocity, people who understand that empathy isn't a one-way street. In these relationships, your boundaries are not just respected, they're celebrated. Your no is as sacred as your yes. These are what Jung described as mutual individuation relationships, where two people walk their own path, side by side. No one is disappearing for the other. No one is overfunctioning. Each person is responsible for their emotional well-being, and yet there is support, connection, and presence. This is real intimacy, not built on dependency, but on truth. In these spaces, you stop mistaking guilt for love. You no longer feel compelled to prove your worth through emotional labor. You understand now, your sensitivity is not here to be exploited. It's here to be honored. And honoring it starts with choosing how, when, and with whom you share it. Jung noted that even in this stage, remnants of the old patterns can resurface. That's part of the integration process. You may still feel that familiar guilt when you set a boundary. You might still flinch when someone disapproves of your no, but now you recognize it for what it is, a conditioned response, not a reflection of your truth. You're not here to carry everyone's weight. You're here to walk freely, to feel deeply, and to live fully. Your empathy is no longer the tool you use to feel safe. It's the expression of your strength. You've reclaimed it, refined it, and now you offer it consciously. This is what Jung meant by the individuated self. A person who is both compassionate and complete. Someone who gives from choice, not compulsion. Someone who can be present with pain without becoming it. And someone who knows that loving others starts with loving themselves. By now, the empath's journey has evolved from survival to sovereignty. You're no longer defined by your ability to give endlessly. You're defined by your capacity to choose when to give, how to give, and most importantly, when not to. Jung emphasized this power of emotional choice as the hallmark of psychological maturity. It's not about shutting off your feelings. It's about managing them with discernment and care. This isn't emotional numbness, quite the opposite. It's the deep inner knowing that not every emotion you sense is yours to process. Not every story you hear requires your intervention. Not every tear demands your shoulder. You still care, but you care wisely. You're not reactive. You're responsive. You assess your emotional bandwidth before you offer your energy. And when you do give, it's real, grounded, free of resentment or hidden expectations. Jung's vision of the integrated empath includes one final critical trait: reciprocal relationships. This is where the game truly changes. Gone are the days of one-sided dynamics, where you do all the holding, all the soothing, all the emotional heavy lifting. In reciprocal relationships, your needs are just as important as anyone else's. You're no longer the container for everyone's chaos. You're a co-creator of connection, one based on balance, not burden. These relationships are often quieter, more stable. They may not feel as intense as the roller coasters of your past, but they're real. They nourish instead of deplete. They offer space for mutual growth. Jung saw these bonds as the most spiritually and psychologically advanced form of connection, where both individuals remain whole, even in closeness. And perhaps most importantly, you finally give yourself permission to receive. This is a radical shift for the empath who spent a lifetime in the giver role. You learn to take up space, to let others hold you, to allow love and not just give it out. Jung understood that this is often the final, most difficult threshold. To believe that your needs aren't a burden, but a birthright. This belief transforms how you move through the world. You no longer chase validation. You no longer beg to be seen. You see yourself. You honor your journey from the child who was never allowed to be selfish to the adult who now chooses when and how to give. That's not arrogance. That's integrity. That's whole.